Hello everyone. Today I will tell you stories from many different stories, contributed by Nexons. Not that long ago I worked the night shift as a part-time security guard. It was a really sweet gig because I got to work with a good friend of mine. The job wasn't that difficult. It was literally just doing the rounds of a 5-story building. We would turn up, do a few walk-arounds, and then, once we were satisfied that the building was secure, we would always be on our way. So one night, just as we're finishing up, I got a notification that one of the alarms had been tripped. It was exciting and frightening because I was new to the job and this was my first piece of action. The alarm meant that there could be potentially an intruder in the building. The alarm told us that the activity was coming from the 4th floor. We decided to split up. I was going to use the stairs as usual and my friend was going to head up the fire escape. I raced up the stairs. My heart was pumping with adrenaline. I was mentally preparing myself for what I was about to confront. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw that night. There in the center of the floor, on the 4th floor, was a young girl. She looked to be either in the 2nd or 3rd grade of elementary school. She had a bob haircut and she was sitting right there in the walkway holding her knees up to her chest. I called out to her, "What are you doing in here this time of night?" There was no response. It was far too late at night for her to be here. It was to end. Her head was leaned forward over her knees. I couldn't see her face. I called out again and I again got nothing back. The little girl remained unresponsive. I started to worry. I heard my friend calling as he came up the fire escape. I turned and called out to him, "Hey, I'm back here. I got an unresponsive child, man. What do I do?" My friend approached and stopped in his tracks as he looked at the little girl. I swear his face turned pale in the blink of an eye. Then suddenly the little girl reversed to her feet and she began to run. She practically sprinted down the stairs and we gave chase. Now I'm ashamed to say that us two grown men could not catch up to her. We ran all the way down the stairs to the ground floor and, despite there being no exits, we lost her. It was as if she vanished into thin air. My friend and I exchanged nervous glances. We knew that all the doors were locked. We had only just locked the ground floor doors a few moments before we started searching for the girl. I looked at my friend as he stood there trying to make sense of it all and I heard him mutter, "He's not of this world." We got out there once, double checking. She wasn't in the building. The building was locked. All the doors were locked. I cannot explain it. A few years ago this happened to a friend. He was on vacation at his grandfather's place in a rural area, basically the middle of nowhere, with the closest neighbor being kilometers away from them. Like with any countryside building, there is no proper plumbing in the house, so the restroom was just outside. It was about 3 a.m. the night to pitch black, when my friend decided to go to the restroom using his torch on his phone. He made his way to find it, did his thing, and right before leaving he took a photo. He had opened the restroom door ajar to take a snap on Snapchat of all the darkness surrounding it. The idea was to show all the friends how brave he was in the dark alone. He almost dropped his phone because the latter wasn't true in the picture. There was a door on the left with the empty void just next to it, but in the dark. If you look, it seems like a couple are standing facing the camera. The man looks like he's wearing a suit and the woman in front wearing a red dress. He was really shaken about the image he'd just taken, so he quickly wrote, "Take a screenshot," and hit send to everyone, including me, while trying to muster up the confidence to return back to his house. The explanation, we still don't really know what caused it. May one be an illusion just under the right angle. It may also be Photoshop, but he hasn't told us it was a joke in all these years. I still have it saved on my desktop and I still get shivers whenever I see it. I work in a nursing home. About a month ago, an elderly woman who had been diagnosed with a mental disorder was introduced to our care home. She seemed perfectly coherent and we spoke a little. I was surprised by the diagnosis. To be honest, she was really switched on for her age, which was 75. Her responses to questions and her conversation was quite articulate. It got to the point where my colleagues and I were seriously doubting her diagnosis. She was a total joy in her first morning at our care home. I heard as I came into work. I was working the night shift. That day at about 10 a.m., the nurse call button was pressed. I went in to check on her and she simply said I pressed that by accident. I'm sorry. I told her not to worry and I thought nothing of it. I went to attend my chores down the hall. Not 10 seconds, a call light appeared again from her room. Another nurse responded to her call. I remained in earshot for a moment. I was in the corridor and her door was closed. Because it was so late and there was no other noise in the home. I could hear every word they were saying. My colleague asked for the reason why she rang the nurse bell. The lady asked that man before she said. My colleague said, "Oh yeah. What about him? He frightens me. He has the faces. You know, he really frightens me." The old lady replied, "Oh." My colleague said, "She has a beautiful face, but don't let her trick you. She wants to kill you. If you look in her eyes, she'll eat you. But he's a male member of staff. Perhaps see her," the lady shouted. It was quite alarming to hear the lady, which had been so pleasant until now, shouting in the dead of night. It felt totally out of character. She sounded completely exacerbated too. I knew that there were no windows or doors that anyone could be peering in at her through, since we don't have windows in our bedroom facilities, and the only door was the one I had entered earlier. Since my colleague wasn't aware that I had been eavesdropping, she came out of the room, saw me and stepped back in shock. I said nothing and I just carried on walking down the hall. It got to about 3 a.m. and it was time for my break to sleep for a couple of hours. I woke up in the morning. That lady was completely back to normal again. When I spoke to her, she seemed to harbor no ill feeling towards me, nor did she seem distressed when she saw me. I didn't think much more of it, and when quitting time came, I went home as usual. However, when I came back to work 2 days later, things had changed. The lady had been pressing the nurse call button every hour since 1 a.m. for the last 2 nights, stating that there was someone in the room with her and she couldn't stand them staring at her. She couldn't sleep. She said that someone was hanging from the ceiling staring at her. She had been so escalated it had been difficult to calm her down. This had been ongoing for a month. She rings the bell, complains of someone in the room staring at her. Whenever I answer the call, she always says that she rang the bell by mistake. She will then tell the next member of staff that the woman who answered the call was frightening her. I just want to throw it out there. I look nothing like a lady. By the way, I think this lady is frightened of death and it's manifesting in her everyday life. She is seeing death. I still maintain that she is the most coherent of all our patients in our facility. It's really difficult to believe that she is mentally ill until night falls. Can she truly see something that we can? And what does that mean for me? If she can, I think about these things now and then, but mostly I just pray for her. I pray for the day that she's not tormented by whatever comes to her that night. Thank you. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Some years ago, the organization I worked for had a printing department which had a warehouse/distribution office that was situated several miles from the main office. We had a crew of about 12 people working there. There was a rumor going around that this building was haunted. At first, I didn't believe the rumors. Then slowly stories got out from staff members who worked at the office. They said they often heard the sound of children running around the warehouse at night, but it would be completely empty when they went to check. Some claimed that they would see and hear furniture being moved when they worked at night. Later, their disturbance grew more insistent, with people being touched by unseen hands, things going missing and turning up at random places. One person claimed that she was pressed against the wall by something invisible and big. It all came to her head when someone got badly hurt. A colleague was clearing a few late deliveries late one evening before clocking out. He was at the main office on the second floor. When he was done, He locked the office up and headed downstairs to clock out. As he was in the landing at the top of the stairs, he said something pushed him hard. He flew down the top stairs, then rolled down the other half of the staircase. His screams brought security guards running. They found him at the bottom in a pool of blood. The ambulance and paramedics were called. My colleague and friend was in bad shape. He had a cracked skull, a broken arm, a broken leg, a massive concussion, and was bleeding from his head. He was unconscious. They carefully got him into the ambulance and took him into the emergency room. He did not regain consciousness for a few more days. It was scary because the doctors weren't sure if he would have brain damage until they could assess his responses. When he woke up, he told us what happened. He said something and pushed him. They checked the CCTV and saw him go down the stairs, then suddenly flew forwards down the stairs. An investigation was done, but they found nothing that could prove that he tripped. Eventually he got better and he never went to work on the stairs alone. Again, stories of minor disturbances continued until we sold off the building. It's still standing now. It's the headquarters of some charity organization. The video still exists. According to the security guy, they keep it under lock and key, along with several other videos that show weird things happening in the building. Perhaps someday I'll be able to get my hands on them. I'd see feature in a few of them, but those are less exciting stories. This happened when I was studying in America. I went camping with some of my fellow students. We were staying in a very old cabin that had been renovated during the pioneer days. In the middle of the night I woke up to a strange sound, even though it was dark in there. I could tell that the other kids in the cabin were awake too. I heard a child crying. It's creepy enough to hear a child crying in the dead of night, but it was even worse to hear that child's cries coming from within the old pioneer cabin. I looked around the room, but I couldn't see anything. I could pinpoint the location of the crying, but I couldn't see a figure there. It was silent, save for that distraught child's cries in the cabin. The muffled sobbing and sniffing was painful to listen to. It was really frightening. Then I heard one of the kids from across the cabin call out from his bed, "What's wrong?" There was no reply, but there was a change in the nature of the child's crying. It sounded like the child, a boy, was now crying for his grandma. It was like he was calling her. I lay there hoping and praying it would stop, but it didn't. Something worse happened. The room wasn't pitch black, and I think everyone in there had a view of the open space in the middle of the room. A pale moon lit that spot, and that's where I saw it. A black shadow slowly manifested in that spot. It was almost as if it came through the floor. It was bent over like an old woman. The shadow seemed to be searching for something on the floor. I could see old withered arms grasping and groping the hardwood floor. Then I heard another voice. The shadowy old woman figure then looked upwards towards one of the boys in his bed. I saw the face of the old woman. Her eyes were gouged out. There was nothing but black hollow craters. Her head went backwards and I saw a long slit through her neck. I'll never forget this, because the first word that came to mind when I saw her neck like that was yawn. It was like the open wound in her neck was yawning at me. She then went back, searching the floor with her hands, calling, "Baby boy. Baby boy, where have you gone?" This was too much. I was frozen with fear. But one of the girls screamed. It was the loudest scream I have ever heard. It set off mass panic and pandemonium in the cabin. Adults rushed in from the other cabins, but the panic didn't subside. I knew at that point we had all seen the same thing. When everybody finally calmed down, we couldn't see the old woman anymore. We couldn't even hear the boy cry. I heard later on the trip that the cabin had been attacked by merciless bandits in the pioneer days. However, there was no official mention of fatalities or anything like that. It did make me wonder about what kind of residual energy was left over in the cabin. Thank you. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Last night I went to go spend the night at my girlfriend's apartment. I got to her apartment around 12:30 a.m. and locked the doors and turned all the lights off because she was already asleep in her room. I laid down and fell asleep with her almost immediately. Around 1:30 a.m. We were both kind of half-conscious because she had switched sleeping positions and kissed me. And not even a minute or two later, we were both simultaneously woken up by a loudest voice that came from the open door of her room. That was a deep male voice saying "full." That's all I can remember, because my adrenaline kicked in and I was ready to fight if someone was in the apartment with us. Neither of us can remember exactly what was said, aside from it being super loud. Honestly, I was scared and there was someone in the apartment with us. I immediately threw my hand over my girlfriend's mouth because she was freaking out about the scream, because I knew she thought there was someone in the apartment with us as well. I looked at her and motioned for her to be quiet. As I got up and turned all the lights on and searched the entire apartment, there was nothing. All of the doors were still locked and I checked everywhere where any person could hide and found nothing. I tried to lay out all the facts after this happened, but I've concluded that it had to have been some sort of an entity. Now the facts that I've paid attention to while trying to debunk this. You can hear the neighbors throughout the entire building, but only while they're screaming or stomping around. And even then it's always muffled because it's coming through the floral walls. So it couldn't have been that because of how loud this voice was. So it eliminates that possibility. The window was open in her room because it was hot in her room and I've even looked outside in that window. We live in Upper Michigan's Upper Peninsula and we have a lot of snow. This eliminates that factor. My girlfriend's dog was sleeping between my legs when we heard this voice and she was dead asleep when I got up to check what the hell it was. So that eliminates the possibility of it being the dog. They've both been pretty bewildered by this encounter. I spent the night there again recently and found that a closet door, which we had confirmed had been closed before we went to sleep, was found wide open. This was only due to what I encountered seconds before, which was feeling someone's hand on my pillow next to my face. I could feel the pressure it made and it made me wake up. I looked at the pillow and there was an imprint of what appeared to be a large hand. When I was observing the pillow, I had noticed the closet door was wide open and my girlfriend's dog was laying on the floor staring at it. I don't know what it means, but I know something is going on and I need to get to the bottom of it. I recently moved into an apartment in a newly built building. My apartment is on the ground floor and it's in the corner. I love it. It's in a really convenient location and the windows let in a lot of natural light. I had no complaints. A couple of friends helped me move in and we had some celebratory drinks to mark the occasion. We stayed up all night and I got a little drunk. It was great. My friends left at around noon the following day and I took a shower. My friends smoke, so I was worried about the smell on my hair. I'm really proud of my hair. It's straight and black and I've never had it permed or colored. I tried to keep it in the best condition I can. So after I shampooed, added treatment and rinsed, I left the bathroom feeling refreshed. I started cleaning up the mess from last night. There were snacks, empty cans and bottles everywhere. It was when I was vacuuming that I noticed something. There were long strands of hair all over the floor. They looked as long as mine, but the color and thickness wasn't quite the same. This is where things get a little bit weird. Both of my friends, who are also females like me, have short hair and I have long hair. The hair on my floor pretty much was the same length as mine, so it couldn't have come from either of my friends. I just moved in and the place was spotless, so I had no clue how it got there. Although I was skeptical, I figured it must be my hair. Later that day, a friend who wasn't free to help me with the move came over to see the new place. She couldn't find the streets, so I agreed to meet her at the station. Now this friend of mine is really into the paranormal and the occult, so for fun I asked her about the hair on my floor. She didn't seem that interested, so the conversation quickly changed. When we got to my place, I saw hair on the floor again. I thought that I must have forgotten to pick it up and put it in the bin. So I didn't pay much mind. My friend was visiting from another prefecture, so she was going to be staying with me. She had just come off a long train ride, so she asked to use the shower. I heard the sound of running water from the shower. After a few moments I heard the water turn off, and then my friend came running out of the bathroom. The bathroom was all she could stand at. Her face was pale. I gave her a minute to get some clothes and to calm down a little, and then I asked about what happened. She said that she saw a woman with long hair in the bathroom. I was shocked by this. It was a newly built apartment. It wasn't like some haunted Gothic manor. I explained that it was a new place and it's not haunted. I was hoping at this point she would say gotcha or something, but she didn't. She was adamant of what she saw. She was so shaken up by what she saw she refused to stay with me that night. I was completely shocked by this because I was really looking forward to hanging out with her. She quickly gathered up her things, and as she was walking out, she told me that she would be in a nearby 24-hour family restaurant until she figured out what to do next. She shouted at me to call her if anything happened, and she begged me to go with her. I really didn't have time for her spooky story, so I dipped my heels in and I said that I wouldn't leave. I can be quite stubborn. She left and I was so annoyed I stood there with her words still swirling around my head. I wanted to prove her wrong, so I decided that I was going to have a shower like she did, and then go find her and convince her that she was wrong again. I'm stubborn. While I was in the shower, I was thinking, just because you like the occult and look for the paranormal in every place you go, it doesn't give you the right to ruin someone's moving. I was really happy with my new place. I was cursing out loud and thinking about what I was going to say to her. When I saw her, I was shampooing my hair and I felt something strange. My head felt weird. It felt like fingers were scratching my scalp, and I was thinking, I'm only using the fingertips to massage my scalp. Why is this hurting? I stopped washing my hair for a second. I brought my hands forward and I still felt the sensation of hands scratching and massaging my scalp. I was horrified. I realized that these hands weren't my own, and then I heard a voice. It was very faint, but I could hear it close to my ear. The voice was definitely female. I spun around to look behind me and I caught a glimpse of a woman who appeared to have a burned face. The rest is missing time to me. I wasn't asleep, but I wasn't conscious. I literally found myself sitting on the floor of the shower with the water blasting on my head. I quickly rinsed off and I got the hell out of the bathroom. I threw on some clothes and ran out of the apartment. I called my friend and found out where she was hanging out, and I raced over to her. We spoke and said that we would both go and see the real estate agent the next day to find out if they just sold me a home with a history. This is what I heard about my new place from the real estate agent. Before the apartment block was built, there was a florist in its place. Florist's daughter was a beautiful young woman with long, dark hair. She was, like me, incredibly proud of her hair. One day the gas boiler in the bathroom exploded while she was using the bathroom and her face was burned. Her longtime partner broke up with her. Because of her new appearance, she became socially withdrawn. She became hikomiyaki. She couldn't stand the sight of her own face and devoted as much time as she could to maintaining what was left of her damaged hair. She shampooed, treated it and rinsed it several times a day. She often stood in front of the mirror, asking out loud, "Is my hair beautiful?" While she brushed it, she would often ask her mother the same question. However, due to over-maintaining and the emotional toll of being in a serious accident, her hair began to fall out. That was the final straw for the traumatized young woman. She ended up taking her life in the bathroom. Just like you. A young lady with beautiful hair. The real estate agent said and sat and smiled at me as if he was reminded of something nostalgic. I managed to get out of my contract and I secured a move out. Before I left, I left the spirit of that woman with the beautiful long hair, some flowers in the bathroom. I hope she'll be at peace before too long. Last year in February, my family and I decided to go on a little getaway trip for my son's birthday. We decided to rent a room in a charming hotel. I was a bit ashamed to say that our household earnings are a bit lower than the average, So we decided to rent the cheapest hotel we could find on a weekday to save some cash. The hotel had quite a low number of reviews, and although it was old, we decided it would be suitable for our stay. I was pretty happy with the hotel. I was looking forward to our stay. There was an amusement park, an aquarium nearby, not to mention the hotel's delicious sounding menus. My wife was as excited as I was for our little getaway. Before heading out, I decided to look up the hotel's phone number online to see which would be the best bus routes and see if they had a pickup service. I didn't realize when I booked the hotel, but when I searched the hotel's name I found something unexpected. It turns out that the hotel I had reserved for my family was somewhat famous. A ghost research website said that it was haunted and rooms seemed to be rife with paranormal activity. It was pretty spooky, I have to say. I thought, since it was such an old hotel, it could be possible. Reading all these spooky stories about the hotel made a part of me regret that I didn't perform a full search before booking. But the other part of me was quite intrigued, so I kept searching. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything but the ghost research website. So later we headed to the hotel and I was curious to see what it would be like. When we got there, I picked up some strange vibes. It had a pretty intense atmosphere, just like the website said. Annette, who I assume was the landlady or the owner, and she gave us the key to our room. What made me start to sweat a little was the fact that we would be staying in the room that the website said had the most activity. I guess that's why it was the cheapest. I was a bit creeped out and I even asked to change rooms, but to my surprise, the landlady said that there were no other free rooms. That night I wanted to say there's no way. There's no other free rooms, but I didn't want to cause a scene in front of my family. It might have ruined my son's birthday, so I just left it alone. So we headed up to our haunted hotel room. I opened the door expecting the worst, but I was pleasantly surprised. The room was big and beautiful. The bathroom was huge. Our dinner was fantastic too. It was so cheap I even could afford to drink some alcohol, and I felt totally relaxed, and before long all the ghostly comments I had read online disappeared from my mind. I had a bath, and after I felt like I wanted to drink a little, so headed to a store I spotted on the way to grab some drinks and some snacks. I loved how big the room was. It felt so great. I drank more than normal. I was just enjoying the luxury of the hotel. After about an hour or two, I kind of passed out. I woke up later in the night to hear my wife crying. I was still half asleep, so I kind of remembered what happened. My wife replied, "It's so fun. It's been a long time since I had such fun. Thank you." Second time she spoke, my wife's voice sounded a little different. I was still pretty drunk, so I didn't pay much mind. Just as I was falling back to sleep, I heard the sound of a door opening. My wife and son were sleeping in the same room next to me, so I jumped up immediately to see who was in her room. When I opened the door, I saw my wife and son standing there. "Hey, weren't you just sleeping next to me?" I asked my wife. She said, "No, I was giving our son a bath while you slept another." Now that couldn't be. She stared at me trying to understand my confusion. I looked over at the side of the bed that I thought my wife had been sleeping on, and I noticed that there were 2 wet marks on her pillow, teardrops. My spine went as cold. I should have known that wasn't my wife's voice. Could that have been the ghost I read about? I went into protection mode and I vowed I wouldn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat and watched over them. The sun rose and I'm happy to say that nothing further happened. I was so exhausted the next day, but I tried to keep the fun of the trip in mind ever since this event. Before booking a hotel, I always search online to see if it has any paranormal postings about it. My entire life I've lived in the same home. My grandfather built it in the 70s and my mom remodeled it while she was pregnant with me. It's in Southern California, in a slow and mellow beach community founded in the 50s, so there's not a lot of paranormal stuff happening. The only peculiar thing while growing up was the man that whistled outside my bedroom window every night at exactly 7:43 p.m. I never thought anything of it, and by the time I was in middle school I basically used it to keep time. The whistle itself sounds like a man calling to a dog, a short and happy sort of sound. He whistled the same sound every night at the same time. It even stayed during daylight savings time. One night my mom was in my room with me, not a common occurrence, as she had her own problems and we didn't see each other often. Even when I was younger, I heard the whistle and promptly got up to brush my teeth and wash my face, like I did every night, and my mom reacted kind of odd. In retrospect, I can understand why she was in the middle of saying something. I just walked out of the room. She followed me and asked why I was getting ready for bed this early. Great parenting, Mom, and I just said I heard the whistle. I'm not gonna sleep yet, but it's time for me to get ready. At least I was young, and that's how my mom tells it. She has a terrible memory, but she said that's the one thing that she can quote verbatim, besides the Pledge of Allegiance. Because it was so unsettling, she hasn't heard any whistle. She didn't want to say anything, so she listened at the exact same time. Next night she still heard nothing, but she saw me walk to the bedroom, get ready for bed. She didn't tell me until I was 14, so that I wouldn't be scared. Over time I started to whistle with the man. I would imitate it perfectly, and I knew almost instinctively when to do it. It's like when you wake up to the same time alarm. So often you wouldn't sleep in, even if you wanted to. I started to do this during my senior year, so I didn't really notice when the whistling got closer. I still don't know why for sure, but I think it was because that's when I seriously started thinking about colleges during my senior year. There was some family drama, and I had to move back in with my father for a few months, and it seemed like something was missing, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It wasn't the whistling itself, but the feeling of being watched that always accompanied it. I had gotten so used to it that I didn't realize how uneasy it really made me feel. After I turned 18, I moved back into the house alone. My mom got arrested, nothing crazy. Don't worry, and she was gone for 4 months and wanted me to stay and watch the house. This whole thing put me off school, so I spent most of my time either working or focusing on getting my GED. This is when things got weird. I never thought of the man as a bad spirit in any sense. I had almost come to see him as a guardian angel. I made up a name for him, Gregory, and his dog was Socks. It was about January of this year, freshly 19, with a GED and big dreams of college, that I realized just how sinister things were. Only I could hear the whistle. The amount of sleepovers I had while I was the one getting ready for bed too early definitely proves it was only outside my window. If I were at any other spot in the house, I wouldn't hear it. It had slowly moved closer to the window over the years as well. I used to be on the street before I realized it had crossed the grassy slope from the sidewalk to the brick foundation that my house sat on. The nights I applied for my new college, I got in and I'm transferring in next fall. I heard a tap. I've got some crappy friends and thick blinds, so I went over and swung them open fast to spook whatever ass had tried to spook me. But I saw nothing. It was getting dark and the sunset over the ocean was bright, red, unusual, but nothing alarmed me. But what I saw in the sunset definitely terrified me. There he was, his head cocked and just staring out from the outside wall, besides my large front-to-ceiling window, only for a moment. It was almost like when something flashes on the screen for a tenth of a second and you can remember it, but you didn't have enough time to really process it. The face was pale and his eyes were thin with age, but still intense. He had no facial hair. His eyebrows were thick and weary, and when I blinked I saw him like a brand on the back of my lids. I was shaken. The encounter felt like a warning. Why on God's green earth would the man that has been alongside me for so long try to hurt me? I almost felt betrayed. He had become the one constant. But now, when I look back on what I perceived to be a comforting caregiver, I'm only met with an uneasy stomach and the beginnings of a headache. This was just the beginning. Every night he tapped on my window, and every night I jumped. I was still living alone and didn't want to call anyone about it. I was crazy. I'm batshit bonkers. and I knew it. I felt isolated and alone, unable to go anywhere but the place I feared most. My friend had either moved away for college or was staying with their parents, so I couldn't ask them for help or my family would lock me up. There's been a history of bipolar disorder in my family and they shunned her for it. If it came forwards about talking about a ghost man that I named Gregory and his dog in my window, they'd laugh. It seems funny from an outsider's perspective. Really. I started taking the graveyard shift and doing night classes that cost me more than they were worth. I stopped having friends over because, of course, they were going to hang at my place, where there was never anyone to bother our hooligan asses. I was so lonely for about a month. I started having panic attacks when I would look outside at work to see the sun setting one particular night. It was so bad that my boss called after my concerned co-worker contacted her and said that I needed to go home. It was the last thing I wanted, but this fear was making me physically sick. So I decided to grow some balls and stand in front of my open window at 7:43 exactly. I stood there with chills up my back and waited after moments of tense, static KY silence. I turned to look at the clock in confusion. It was 7:45. There was nothing, no whistling, no tapping, and definitely no face. I felt triumphant. I was almost cocky when I rarely did nothing. I felt like I had conquered Gregory in socks. Just as I was coming down from Victory High, I heard what sounded like long nails on my hardwood floor. It almost sounded like my dogs, but I had put them in the backyard to do their business and neither of them were big enough to make that almost galloping sound. I couldn't see anything with my eyes, but I felt the fear of an animal running towards me at full speed, the hesitation between a heartbeat. I had nowhere to run, but I knew I had to do something. I could feel the ominous and dreary presence of the man coming from just outside the door, inside my hallway, and the threat of a feral dog I knew was in front of me but couldn't see for a moment. Everything went quiet again and I almost forgot how to breathe. I felt the presence. "Leave, I own you, Zoe." It was clear as day, and right in my ear I could almost feel the breath rust on my hair. I broke down crying. I had never felt so helpless in my entire life. This thing that watched me grow and go through crappy puberty years and breakups and terrible family drama knew everything about me. I had let this dead man dictate my life so long. He got into my head. I rented a shitty motel room for the next few weeks with my pups. I didn't recommend putting two dwarf pit bulls in a hotel room, and when I finally came back, the whistling was back on the street, accompanied by the sound of paws on concrete. This story terrifies me to my core. I'm in the city that I'll call home for a few more months to meet with my leasing agent. But right now I'm going home tomorrow and can feel that familiar sensation of what I can only describe as heartbreak and a loss of control seat backing. I don't want to go back. I found this place to share this story, and it felt like one of the few places I could ask my advice. I tried. Sage and even had my deep Christian friend come over and say prayers at my doorway. I guess that's the thing I don't know. Please, I need help. This isn't a lie and it's not a story. I am terrified to go home to that empty house, but I'm saving for an apartment and travel expenses and tuition, so I can't go to a motel. I really and genuinely don't know what to do. Anything will be helpful. I'm moving in January, but Gregory got so close to me that I have heard that in order to hear something that clearly is from the dead means that he is strong. Okay. So this is a really weird story that someone told me at a college party. I really like it and I want to share it. So here I go. So this guy's parents got divorced when he was a baby. He was raised exclusively by his mother. His mom couldn't afford to put him into a nursery, so he spent a lot of time at home alone. That's pretty awful. But it gets worse. One day his mother came home earlier than normal from work and she walked in on him talking to someone. She raced over to her son expecting to protect him from some sort of intruder, but she saw him speaking aloud to an empty apartment. He was smiling and giggling and speaking with something unseen. That little boy grew into the young adult who told me this story. He said that he doesn't remember much about those times, but he does remember that there was In his words, something like a black shadow in the apartment with him. He said that the black shadow was always around him. I was pretty horrified, but he assured me that it wasn't a frightening thing. The shadow to him was like an extra parent whenever he was alone. He said that he heard really kind words from it, and he even said that the shadow played with him. He was a little drunk when he told me this, but it seemed like he really thought of the black shadow as a father figure, even though his father wasn't in the picture at the time. His hopeful childhood heart was glad of the company, he said. His mother watched him closely after this revelation, perhaps with a heavy heart pondering her previous neglect. After she kept an eye on him, he said that the black shadow disappeared with a chuckle. He said it didn't disappear for too long, though he still sees the shadow from time to time during important life events. Even though he doesn't see it every day, he says he feels its presence. As a child, he was never scared of dark, shadowy areas. You know, under the beds, closets open at night, etc. He welcomed them, and to this day he looks for the shadow, and sometimes he sees it. Even though he told me this story with a smile on his face, I can't help but feel like that smile was a little lonely. Food for thought. Perhaps, maybe not. All shadow people are malicious for it.